thanks Justin, thanks Carson, thanks Kate. They all kind of mentioned this to some extent, but it takes a lot of work to be up at the Hill during the session. There's a lot of folks that help, from league staff to your staff to electeds that come up and help us get everything done. And one thing that we always notice is that when we have folks coming from the cities, whether they've worked with the cities and come to the league, or are on the board or anything like that, once they're on the Hill with us, we always kind of get the sentiment of like, I had no idea that this is what this was like, and I wish I knew. And we figured that rather than gatekeep that information, we would have a panel discussion talking about some of the things that folks have learned over time. And as well, at the end, what the league needs to keep in mind, since we aren't in City Hall as much as you are. So if I can go ahead and invite the panel up to join me, we have our second vice president and Santa Clara Councilmember Krista Hinton. We have our legal director, and I noticed there's a really terrible good pun, Dirk Burton, wherever you are, legal director, Jared Tingy, and also our marketing communications manager, Cassidy Hansen. So you all have roots in local government and then have kind of come to a broader perspective. So to just start with, can you briefly tell us about your professional background or political background prior to joining the league as either a staff or as an officer? And we'll start with you, Cassidy.
Great. So I was thinking about this question, and I realized that I dipped my toe in Utah politics a little earlier than I thought. When I was an undergraduate at BYU, I actually did exit polling one election year, and that's kind of how I started to get to know what the state looked like in terms of political ideology and hopes for Utah. After I graduated, I worked at the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, they draft all of the bills, and I worked to edit those bills and proofread them. I then went to Purdue University for graduate school and studied political communication apprehension. Then I graduated and I worked on a commission that isn't around right now but used a lot of GIS, so you can guess which one that is. And then I got a job at West Jordan and was able to be a policy analyst for them and a public liaison, and then left for the league. So that's kind of my background.
Incredible. We'll just keep going down the line. Jared.
Thank you. Jared Tingy. After law school, moving from San Diego, I went to Duchesne County and went from 72 degrees to -9 degrees. And I thought, what in the world am I doing?
Shane and Santa Barbara, not mirror images?
You know, no. Anyone here from the Uinta Basin? Yes, I love it. So I worked out there, Duchesne County, as a deputy county attorney for 5 years, and then moved over to West Jordan as well, and was there for about 5 years, and working as a senior assistant city attorney, and then started working for the league.
Excellent, thank you. And Councilmember Hinton.
Thank you. So I first got involved in politics in 2011 when my dad decided to run for Utah State Legislature. And I had no idea he was planning on that. He asked me if I would serve as his campaign manager, and I said, absolutely. What does that mean? We started from zero. We had no idea what we were doing. I like to tell the story that at the beginning of his campaign, he was going to be in a parade. I think it was the homecoming parade for the university here. He asked me and my sister to help him with some signs. So what did we do? We went to the scrapbook store and got some big posters ready. We had sparkles, everything. Those are not campaign signs. But it was adorable. It said, vote for my papa. We had the little kids walking with him. So that's how I got my start. And then, so he ran for the legislature every 2 years for the time he served in the legislative body. So I served every year with him. I helped him with his constituent communications on the off years. And then in 2021, I decided to run for an open city council seat in my city, which is Santa Clara. I was successful, and I'm finishing up my first term this year.
Incredible, thank you. So moving from those positions of working for a singular city or government entity to now coming to the league with that more macro perspective, what was the biggest surprise for you as you transitioned between those two spaces? And Jared, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. I think the number one thing that I was just shocked about is the many different political considerations that happen at the Capitol during session that when I was working for, at least for West Jordan, and I was looking at a certain law, in fact, one of the laws that is currently on the books is defining a franchise tax. Well, it defines it as a franchise tax, or a tax similar to a franchise tax. And so when I looked at that, I thought, well, this just needs to be changed. So we need to communicate that to the league, and they can just go and change it. I had no idea how difficult it is and how many different variations or variables that come into play just to get one line of code in to change the law. And so I think that was the biggest shock for me is, wow, there's a lot more going on with this than I ever imagined.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinton, how about you?
I think my biggest surprise was what Justin and Carson were just talking about, is the sheer amount of time, energy, blood, sweat, tears that goes into the legislative session by our league staff. The early morning meetings, some of which I was invited to, but I know you work tirelessly throughout that session, and the speed at which legislation is brought forward, changed, revised is incredible, and you guys do a great job of communicating that. You do a great job of dividing and conquering, but I had no idea all of that went into each session from the league.
Totally. And Cassidy, who helps us do a good deal of that communicating, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway?
For me, it's actually how forms of government really change policy impacts for the different cities and towns. When I worked for the legislature, I don't think I realized how much a form of government can affect implementation. And I think as you sit here, if you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I remember what my form of government is or what I should be doing, shameless plug for Jared. Jared has done a few powers and duties videos, so I encourage you to look that up and also look within your own code, because some of you have big differences even though you may be in the same form of government. And I think that's something that the legislature maybe doesn't understand as well. Like, it's easy to understand, okay, you're in a big, like, mayor council form of government. It's similar to what the legislature and governor does, or similar to what we see federally. But if you're in some of these other forms of government, they may not know. So that actually really surprised me.
That's really interesting. Kind of following up on that, how has your perspective on local government changed, and if so, how, kind of with this broader scope? And we'll start with you this time.
I did not understand how important local government's voice and concerns were with our legislature, with our legislators for our districts. We have a perspective that is obviously different than what legislators have, but they are trying to track so many bills, so many changes, so many iterations of a bill. They can't possibly understand how that's going to affect our cities, and it's really important that we reach out and use our elected seat or role to communicate that to them on behalf of our citizens.
Excellent. Cassidy.
I have just really, I love cities. I love driving through Utah and seeing the different cities and meeting all of you and saying, oh, this is so-and-so from this city. They're doing a great job. I really feel like I have grown a greater appreciation for the ways that cities innovate and are resilient. You innovate every year as you try and work through your budgets to provide your municipalities the services it needs and to help create great quality of life for your residents. And you're resilient as you go through uncertainty, as you go through changes in power, whether that be at the state or within your own city. And I'm just like I feel a really great sense of pride to be able to help some of you with that and to see your work. And I celebrate your accomplishments, and so do the rest of league staff.
That's awesome. Jared. Yes. Follow that up.
And mic drop. No. I really have enjoyed being able to work with each one of you and each of the staff on a staff level as well, being able to reach out to your staff members, those that actually, I'm an attorney, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a building official, I'm not a mayor, I'm not a city manager. There are a lot of things that you know that I have no idea about. And it's fascinating to hear from you and to use that knowledge to then go up to the up during the session and be able to use that information and to tell our legislators.
Excellent, thank you. So following up on what you just said, you are an attorney. So one common thing I think we run into, what are some misconceptions that local officials have about their role in local government or their relationship with the state government?
I think one of the things that the misconception is that it can be that legislation can happen so quickly, and that things can change so quickly, and that it's kind of like what I was saying before. That when there is a bad law, that we can just go and change it. Recently, there was while I was working in West Jordan, there was an issue with the Governmental Immunity Act. And as we looked through it, there were some questions as to, well, how do we deal with this? Because this was a mistake, definitely, that went through. We need to change this. And so, but once you open up the Governmental Immunity Act, you open up a lot of other things. And so being able to identify, okay, what are some of the very simple things that we can do to make things better without taking into account, taking into account all of those other variables and factors.
Totally. Cassidy, question for you. So we've been working on some of this conflict competence stuff. I was chatting about it with a friend who's very into astrology. And there's this concept of the moon being in the 7th house, which is, as she was explaining it to me, this total alignment between emotion, relationships, partnerships, and she was kind of saying, like, that's what you need in some of this conflict competence stuff. But I was also thinking, I like that alignment in terms of our relationships with legislators and how we communicate with legislators, because a lot of times there isn't that alignment of emotion, policy, relationship. Like, those are kind of the 3 foundational pieces. And so based on your experience working with LRGC, working with West Jordan, now working with the League, what do you think are the best opportunities for communities when it comes to building those relationships with legislators?
It's interesting that you use Western astrology, because actually I think we should be more like an animal from the Chinese zodiac, and that animal is dogs.
Love it.
And here's
Say
why.
More. Tell me more.
I'll tell you more. I promise it makes sense. So Duke University had opened up a canine cognition center where they studied dogs. And something that separates dogs from wolves, so wolves, you have survival of the fittest. But because they're so aggressive, we've seen them have issues with their populations, right? Well, they found that the ancestors of dogs, their mantra kind of is survival of the friendliest. So we love dogs because they offer us mutual things, right? They offer us joy, they offer us companionship. And I think we need to apply this idea of survival of the friendliest when it comes to legislators, and this is how. We want to invite them to things, invite them to city events where they can be seen by their constituents that are also your constituents. You also want to be helpful for them. So sometimes when legislators get a problem, they want to fix it, right? They're so excited to fix this problem for their constituent. When in reality, the only way they can fix things is through a bill. That's how they can fix things for their constituents. You have a lot more latitude to fix things quickly, right? If you are a contact that your legislator can have, your legislator can say, hey, our constituent came with this issue. Can you help me resolve it? And if you can prove that you're helpful in resolving those things, we don't have to have a bill. An extra credit if you give your legislator credit. So by adopting this survival of the friendliest, you suddenly create an opportunity and a relationship where legislators come to you to solve problems instead of trying to solve problems with their larger cohort. So that's one way you can work with legislators. As far as constituents go, I think survival of the friendliest works well for them. And also going where your constituents are in terms of communication. I think sometimes we get really obsessed with, like, we have to use social media to get the word out, and we have to use this. Honestly, some of your residents would just prefer an email, and that's a great platform to reach people of various generations because we all have to have emails for everything. So I think as you come together and you're budgeting and you're thinking as a city, how do we communicate? I think you want to do the best at least at one thing, whether that's email, whether that's social media, wherever your residents are, whether it's a sign on your city hall. and just really invest in that so your residents know that you're solving their problems and they know where to get information.
Amazing, thank you. Councilmember Hinton, it's your first term on Santa Clara City Council. You're getting really involved with us up on the Hill. What advice would you have for local officials, whether they're veterans or new, to get more involved with the legislature, get more involved with state policy?
To get more involved, I would recommend getting to know your legislators. So if you don't know them already, reaching out, building a relationship with them, make sure you have their contact information and they have your contact information. I think one thing that's really helpful is to either be part of the LPC or listen to the LPC meetings, know what bills are coming forward and they're being tracked and watched. I think the Friday emails are helpful. The update emails during the session are especially helpful, as are the videos, which are sometimes even entertaining. You can get a good laugh because they're done late at night, I think.
But only sometimes. Catch that.
And especially the action alerts as well. And one thing that our city does is I think a lot of cities do this. They invite their legislators to come and speak with them before the legislative session, which I think is great. You can explain things that are important to your city, challenges you're facing. You can hear from them what things they're working on, what they believe is important, and maybe even like Cassidy said, you might be able to work some things out before they turn into a bill. But even more important, I think, having a post-legislative meeting with your legislators, post-legislative session meeting with your legislators is important. They are kind of accountable to you at that point for the things that they did or didn't do during the legislative session. You could talk about the bills that are passed. You have some time to ask them some questions. So I would highly recommend that, and those are just a few ideas.
Those are all great ideas, thank you. Jared, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add this, that is one thing that I was shocked when starting to work with the league is how effective collective communication to your legislators was, how effective it was. It is phenomenal to see, a legislator dig in the heels, and then as your communications go out, it softens and softens and softens, and it changes the whole game. It changes all that we're doing up at the legislative session. And it is your help and when we send out those action alerts, it really, really does make a difference as you contact your legislators. So.
Awesome, thank you. So before we wrap up, I would just have one more question. We've been talking about what you learned coming, from a city to the bigger league perspective. I also know that there's a lot of things that you all want us to know as the league. We're not in City Hall or Town Hall. And so knowing that, what is something that you've now been in both worlds that you think it is really important for the league as an organization to keep in mind from that kind of singular city perspective? And Councilmember Hinton, we'll start with you.
I think what I would ask league staff to keep in mind is that elected officials are wearing a lot of hats. They have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of assignments, and they're a lot of times have other employment. This is a part-time position for them, and just keep in mind that sometimes they can't be as responsive as they'd like to. They really would, but they have a lot of competing interests. But the league is very important, I think, to them, and don't think because we can't get back right away that you're not a priority.
Thank you. Jared, we'll go with you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that would be helpful is there are a lot of expertise that cities have, and using those expertise in whether it be on the city manager or just the experience and the expertise and the skills and the education. There are a lot of bills that come through that are not in our wheelhouse, and that we don't have that knowledge and that experience. And one of the things that I thought, at least for this session, was phenomenal is one of the cities that we worked with the building department, and they were instrumental in pushing back on some of the ideas and some of the anecdotes that we were hearing, and really just kind of shut down because they could talk the talk. They knew exactly where to go with the conversations, and so I think that is an extremely helpful thing that the league can use in the future.
Awesome. Cassidy, final word.
Oh, no pressure. We, as a league, talk a lot about political capital at the Capitol, but I think it's important for the league to understand that each city has political capital within their own city. So although we all try to follow Arthur Brooks' teaching, whether as staff or as an elected, sometimes we're unsuccessful and we hurt our fellow staff or our fellow council members' feelings, and we suddenly run out of political capital with them. So I think it's just important for the league to remember, like, we're trying to make headway on things, and we're trying to be good, and we're trying to fix our code, and we're trying to do these things for our community. But sometimes there's a lot of intense feelings, because you get the advantage as the league to go into each session. You have 75 representatives and 29 senators to work with. You can work with different ones to create a majority. Some years you avoid some, and other years you know that you have friends. So I think that just really intensifies at a city level, and we're trying our best.
Amazing. Please join me in thanking our panel. This was really insightful.